Trick or treat, everyone! What's on the Halloween menu today? Charcuterie board! Hi guys, welcome back to my spooky series. Today we are going to be making the skeleton candy board with my chocolate brownie flavored cookie recipe and a whole assortment of crawly candy. It's the perfect centerpiece for your Halloween party treat table that your friends and family will snack on all night long. So let's make Mr. Skeleton together and be sure to keep on watching. You are really going to love the flavor of these cookies because of how much they taste like a brownie while having a perfectly soft texture. But if you would prefer a classic sugar cookie, I have a video on that recipe that you can bake and decorate for your candy board the same way. To get started, we are going to mix a third of a cup of unsweetened cocoa powder with a quarter of a teaspoon of salt and a delicious instant coffee of your choice. Drop in 1 teaspoon of that to really intensify the chocolatey flavor. And last is a third of a cup of warm water and 1 tablespoon of pure vanilla extract. This step is called blooming the cocoa powder and really steps up the whole game in any of your chocolatey desserts. What you want to do after giving it a stir is set the mixture aside to let all the cocoa powder dissolve for about 5 minutes and grab another bowl for your dry ingredients, which are 1.5 cups of flour and 3/4 of a teaspoon of baking powder that I'm whisking together. Next, it is time to cream the butter and sugar. For this, your butter should be at room temperature but not too soft. Going in is half a stick, which is also a 1/4 cup, along with a 1/4 cup of shortening, a 1/4 cup of brown sugar, and a 1/4 cup of granulated sugar. Then give it a mix until light and fluffy. For best results, the shortening I used was a high ratio shortening, but if you don't have that, a regular shortening works well too. And guys, I wanted to welcome you to my channel. If you are new here, I'm making lots of spooky Halloween treats this month, so make sure you join the party by clicking subscribe. I'm just feeding our friend Chuck the Crow a scary snack, but don't eat raw eggs at home. Here I am beating in 1 whole egg just until combined, and this is the part where the cocoa mixture comes in to bring everything together. Once completely mixed, it really does look and smell like a brownie already. To form the dough, begin adding in the dry ingredients and a 1/4 cup of Confectioners Sugar, both half at a time until thoroughly incorporated. And when it is near done, I check by folding it over a few times to see that there's no clumps of powder left behind on the bottom. The cookie dough is complete, so we can go ahead and work that dough by kneading it by hand. To roll it out, I recommend placing on top of a flat surface in between 2 sheets of parchment paper to prevent any sticking, and to evenly roll it out to a 1/4 inch thickness. I always like to finish rolling before chilling the dough. That way it is ready to go and easy to cut instead of placing the ball of dough in the fridge and rolling it afterwards. All we need is to transfer the rolled dough to a baking sheet with the parchment paper still underneath and pop it in the fridge for 1 hour. Then we are ready to cut out all the fun shapes. I make 1 tray for the bigger cookies and 1 tray for the smaller ones. This awesome cutter set is from Cherry on Top Supply on Etsy. I will be sure to provide the store link in the description box below. For the first tray, you will need to cut 1 skull, 2 leg bones, 1 hip, and 2 hands. I firmly press the cutter down all the way and peel away the scraps. Then carefully release onto a baking sheet without ruining the pretty shape of the cookie. The bigger shapes are a little easier to cut and release, so I suggest to practice making your bigger cookies first. And also, any extra scraps that you have left over can be saved on the side and re-rolled. If your dough gets sticky, you can always coat the cutter into some cocoa powder, similar to coating with flour, except we don't want a floury taste in the brownie dough, so we won't be using that, but the cocoa powder does the trick to help you with the stickiness. For the second hand, remember to flip it over before placing onto your baking sheet to make the symmetrical mirror image for your skeleton. These cookies are done in a snap. Bake this first tray for 10 minutes at 350, and we have a batch of soft and chocolatey brownie flavored cookies. For the second tray, I cut 8 ribs, 4 regular and 4 flipped, 2 oval joints, 4 arm bones and 2 collarbones, 1 regular and 1 flipped. And since I didn't have room, I put the 6 bones for the spine on a separate tray, and this time baked all of these cookies for 5 to 7 minutes at 350. To dress up Mr. Skeleton, I'm using a royal icing mix that is the easiest icing ever by adding in 1/3 cup of warm water for 1 package of the mix, and I'm beating that together until stiff peaks form, which takes a few minutes, so give it a good workout. It will be at the perfect piping consistency to decorate spooktacular cookies, which means it's decorating time. I put the royal icing into a pastry bag with a decorating tip number 3, and let me show you all the tips and tricks. These ribs have more of a curve to them, so you want the icing to fall and dance around the curves. I stop right where the end bends and continue where I left off for an extra sharp effect. If you continuously pipe in one motion, it won't have that precise pointy edge that we want, and also it helps to have a toothpick handy on the side to clean up any icing that is sticking up. If you notice I'm not piping flat, it is key to let the icing fall above the cookie. Now put his ribs off to the side to dry, and if you are new to decorating, a great shape to warm up and practice outlining with are these spine pieces, which resemble an hourglass shape. I'm guiding the icing as I hold the pressure and finish with a pointy edge. This shape is a fun one since they are small and can be outlined pretty fast. If you are wondering, the complete skeleton in the kit has 6 spine pieces, but I couldn't fit all the bones in my thumbnail, so you may notice some of the bones are missing, but I'm giving you the amount for the entire Mr. Skeleton. The other small shapes are the collarbones and oval joints that are also simple to outline. There are plenty of cookies here to decorate, so I hope you have your family and friends over for a cookie decorating party. I'm going to show you how to achieve a realistic looking bone design. We have 4 arm bones and 2 large leg bones that I drew on with an edible marker to make the middle space of the bone. And after I finished outlining the entire bone, I went and outlined over the edible marker and did the same method with the arm bones. My favorite design has to be the hands. For the wrist and palm, I drew 1 small and 1 large oval shape, and to create the bony fingers, I put the piping consistency icing into a pastry bag with a decorating tip number 5 and piped 2 small ovals, then gently pressed them down with a toothpick and my finger. You can also use cornstarch if there is too much of a peak, and finish by piping 3 ovals for each finger and 2 ovals for the pinky. On the hip cookie, I traced a small hard cookie cutter for the cute heart detailing by tracing 2 and leaving slight space in between, and outlined over them with a tip number 2. And to outline the hip shape, pipe with a tip number 3. Since this is a larger cookie, make sure to get a steady pressure on the bag as you go around. The last cookie to outline is the skull face. We can't forget him. For his eyes, I traced a circle cutter and sketched small slits for his nostrils, outlining those details with a tip number 2, and went back to tip number 3, sketching that icing in one motion to close his face. If his nostrils need to be adjusted, point them out a little with your toothpick so he can breathe. Let's bring Mr. Skeleton to life with the flood consistency icing. I loosened the consistency to a 10-second consistency, which means if you run a spatula through it, it will settle in 10 seconds just by mixing in a tiny amount of water. I put the flood icing in a squeeze bottle and fill enough without overflowing the outline, and in the narrow areas, push the icing around with a toothpick or the metal decorating tip. It is important not to disturb the icing while it dries, so if you need to scoot the cookies around, use a toothpick, spatula, or the tip of your finger. My trick for making the bones more 3D is to flood the first half of the cookie first and let them dry, and after that you could fill in the second half later. It will give the bones some pretty dimension that looks so much more realistic. I apply more icing at the ends of the bone to let them pop out more, and lighter amounts towards the center, staying away from where we outlined the middle space. And I did the short bones, which are the phony bones, the same way. I work on flooding the rest of the cookies and save the second half of the bones for last. When flooding the larger cookies, keep in mind to work quickly in order for the icing to appear as smooth and seamless as possible. The icing is drying as you are working. It helps to outline in sections and pop any air bubbles with your toothpick. Once you finish up the other cookies, remember to fill in the bones. How cool do those look? These cookies are bad to the bone. Before jazzing them up with a little sparkle, the cookies should be completely dry by allowing them to sit overnight, and I'm brushing the Sugar Art Edible Shimmer Powder in the color Super Pearl onto the cookies, being extra light and gentle over the icing by swirling the dust around, and it leaves a shimmer finish over the cookies. A soft, fluffy brush is preferred over a rough one, which can scratch the surface of the icing. You can leave him matte as well, but a little shimmer adds so much. Mr. Skeleton doesn't like dull bones anyway. In the cutout portion of the eye, which we left blank, I'm taking Dab and Hold, which is an edible adhesive, and a super beautiful black disco dust. This is my favorite technique to apply glitter by brushing a thin layer exactly where I want the glitter to go, spreading out any clumps, and shaking the disco dust on top. No worries if you make a mess like I did. Brush the excess onto a plate. That way you can save whatever you didn't use, and Mr. Skeleton is ready to party. We also left the nostrils and hearts on the hips, especially for the glitter. You can decorate those with the glitter too. And for his mouth, I colored the royal icing with black gel food coloring and piped the smile and stitches with a decorating tip number 2. Right before we assembled the candy board with all of the sweet treats, I also included how you can make your own chocolate lollipops with Halloween molds. They can be a little tricky, like my witch's finger mold here. So when filling in the detailed spots, I direct the chocolate with a toothpick as my guide, similar to outlining, and fill the remaining big areas in with a brush just like this. After the black chocolate is set, I place the lollipop sticks into the mold and fill up the fingers with lime melted chocolate, making sure to distribute it to the corners with a spoon and small brush. To achieve this lime color, I mixed white chocolate melts with Color Mill in the shade green and Chef Master candy color, also in green. I gave this witch a sparkly manicure by using the glitter technique from earlier with the Dab and Hold and black disco dust. The other chocolate lollipop design is a candy corn, which we need to fill with the white at the tip of the candy corn first. I dab a small amount of chocolate with my brush and push across the corners. Then once I reach the line in between the white and the next section, I fill the rest in with a thin brush to form a clean line without overlapping the colors. You can either do this with the toothpick technique or the brush, whichever tool is most helpful to you. And to check how it's coming along, feel free to flip the mold over and see if there's anything missing. The final color to fill is the orange. I leave the middle for last since it is the biggest section, which is also going to be seen on the back of the lollipop. The last lollipop design are these pumpkins. This mold was the easiest to do. The same color green from the witch's fingers is being used to fill in the stem, and the same orange from the candy corn consists of the pumpkin, which was created with color mill in the shade orange. Now you know how to make your own chocolate lollipops as a homemade candy option for your candy board.
Come for the candy, eh?
Here is our Crawly selection of candy critters. In this bowl, we have ideas for what you can include in your candy board. I built Mr. Skeleton like this. Again, I couldn't fit all the cookies in my thumbnail, but you can refer to the photo on Etsy as the guide. For the candy, I have Crawly sour worms, Halloween Pez, Frankenstein and pumpkin marshmallow peeps, gummy body parts, gumdrop pumpkins, candy corn of course, assorted twisty lollipops, and a giant gummy snake. On the Dylan's Candy Bar website, they feature these awesome candy kebabs that are so unique, and I finished the board off with spooky sugar decorations and our chocolate lollipops. I hope you enjoyed learning how to make this skeleton charcuterie board, and it gave you an idea for a Halloween party treat. It's Christina here. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next spooky video.